Hi, I'm here again with Brandon Fertig, who is an independent journalist, filmmaker, videographer based in Minneapolis. He's been on the show before, and we talked a lot about the frictions that are going on both there and kind of across the country. And Brandon now has a documentary coming out, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I first just wanted to ask you, what's going on over there? What are your thoughts about what's happening where you are?
Well, just a quick update. And first, just the obligatory thank you for having me on.
Thanks
Great
for
to
being
be.
here.
Uh-huh. Uh, so the riots have stopped. Demonstrations have largely stopped. There have been a couple of residual ones, um, like the officer charged in the death of Floyd
Hmm.
was he had a hearing, I believe is the term, and he was, escorted out of the courthouse, and there were people there to jeer him and all that. So that happened. There have been, since the major riots in May and June, there was another downtown shooting that spread, well, it went viral, as things do, and people said it was a cop-related incident, and it wasn't. But people thought it was,
Mm,
and that's all it took. So
right.
downtown got ravaged. And I think that was probably yeah, that was in August. Actually, that was very recent. That was just probably a month ago. Um, because I know where I was when that happened. I saw it on the news, and that was in late August. Um, yeah, that destroyed a bunch of stuff downtown, and that one really hurt the city because it was downtown, right along the walking boulevard bus route in our downtown Nicollet Mall. So you're talking about high-end stuff, nice restaurants, all that. One of the news stations are sort of the Twin Cities' largest, most popular media is WCCO, and they're right downtown. So, and they're all Nicollet Mall, as a matter of fact. So they just had to stick their cameras out the window, and there it was happening. So it was like literally front and center. Um,
And just to double down on this point, this
mhm.
was an incident that was not police related, but because that was the impression that got out, all this destruction ended up happening, which kind of just illustrates to me that's such an illustration of what's going on in our country as a
Mhm.
whole. I mean, it gets really dispiriting sometimes to think that the truth doesn't really matter because people will grab hold of something and kind of their first impression of something is what drives their action. Is that kind of what's going on? And does that match your impression of what's going on where you are?
Yeah, we're just, for whatever reason, Minnesota is just a test case in high susceptibility for that tendency. Um, and I believe last time I was on here, I said the phrase something like, "We can't handle social media. We're not able to really deal with it yet." And
Yeah,
you know what? 100 years ago or more, they couldn't handle the snake oil salesman coming into town, and people still
right.
can't.
We
I
still
mean,
can't. We still
like,
can't, and they're still here.
like there were a bunch of people do maybe more than there are now because we've learned to be skeptical and second guess and go, oh, be suspicious and resist our first. I still get taken in by a good salesperson. Anyone does, right? But the point is
Mm-hmm.
that as a society we've learned, you know let's go check the reviews first, that kind of thing.
Right.
um,
You'd think so anyway.
well, I think many people have learned to adapt, to overcome the temptations of, say, advertising or just the media that we have. Um, Unlimited food, sexual gratification. These are all things we have to learn how to have some discipline around. And it's going to have to be the same thing with news and social media. That's what I believe. And right now it is
Yeah.
dispiriting because it seems like anytime it would be so easy to cause a riot right now. Just start a rumor, and you could have it if it catches fire. So you can just light a whole bunch of matches, and it seems pretty easy. It's kind of scary,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's and that's why you're seeing a lot of films come out, like, not the one documentary come out that people are talking about. Oh, what's it called? It's on Netflix. Social Dilemma.
Oh, right.
I started watching that. There's a dilemma about whether to get Netflix these days, but I signed up for a free trial to watch this, just to watch that movie. And I saw the first half of it, and I have to watch the whole thing to see obviously how it ends. But the vibe thus far in that movie, and I think the vibe in society in general, I think the one that you were expressing is that, like, even something that's not true is going to cause great harm. And that's been the case forever in humanity, but now it's just the volume is turned way up because of social media. I think there'll come a point where people are going to learn to be skeptical. I bet if you talk to people in Generation Z, like my nephew, I'm guessing when he's an adult, he's not going to be as reactive as we are to it, because he's going to have grown up with it. And so he's not going to be as susceptible to this. So it's something we'll have to adjust to. And I think we will, the way we've adjusted to all kinds of temptations. This is just the latest, the biggest, the most dangerous.
Yeah. So
but yeah, Minneapolis certainly has been susceptible to it. And
how are local people responding to that? And what I'm really wondering is, what is the Black community? Is there a unified Black community in Minneapolis, or are there people who are supportive of demonstrations, people who aren't? What's happening? Because, I know nationwide, what is it? 40% of Black-owned businesses have been destroyed. Not just by the riots, by the COVID measures, I would think mostly, but there has to be. Well, you tell. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what is going on in the Black community in Minneapolis?
Well, after the riots, there was a strong push to defund the police, which made news all over.
Yeah,
and it started to happen. A little bit. I mean, the actual numbers didn't decrease so much, but a lot of officers left. There was so much scrutiny and pressure that I think a lot of the policies changed as far as aggression, and crime just shot right through the roof. So a lot now in the Black community, the leaders in the Black, well, it depends. Like, there are some that are still as anti-police as ever, but I would say the ones that I associate with, the ones who, the pastors, the school principals, as was just exemplified the other week when they went on Facebook Live because one of their students was killed. And they're all expressing the same thing. Nonprofit leaders that I know and work with, they're all saying, it's hard, right? But they're all saying we need good police. We need good police. And they're making it clear that we don't want bad police, but we need police. So they're pushing back against this idea. In fact, one, was it some neighborhood association? One place went so far, maybe it was a business association, went so far as to sue the city. There was some formal pushback in some legal formal pushback. And certainly lots of statements from prominent people in the Black community and organizations that said, we don't want the police defunded. What are you doing?
So because suing the city for defunding the police, or for not providing protection?
I would have to look it up. But there was some significant formal pushback to try to prevent or to punish the city for the conditions that we're in right now, blaming the city, saying this is your fault. You let this happen. It was under your watch.
Right.
More than that, it was caused by you because of your anti-police, obviously extraordinary anti-police rhetoric, and then action. They followed it up with some action. So it's really amazing to me how fast crime went up.
Although that's happened elsewhere too. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, and crime has been going up, even, I think, I'd have to check, but I think even before the riots, crime was on the increase once they started the lockdowns. We have friends who have businesses down in, not downtown LA, but nice areas of LA, and they tell us, street crime during the day, it's never been like this before. It's crime is definitely so. I'm not sure it's that simple to tie it just to the defund the police movement, or even just to, it's not just happening in Minneapolis. It's certainly happening elsewhere too.
Yeah, it's complicated, and because of that, it's hard to get any agreement. People can cling to one thing or say, oh, it's not about the defunding the police, it's about COVID, and so it's easy to
there are a lot
lean
of
on.
big things impacting everything right now. So
yeah, and they are. It'll take a while for cool heads to examine what's happening, particularly because cool heads aren't listened to right now a lot, in large part.
So here's a question I have about, this is getting back to the demonstrations and the riots. Is it your perception, because I know you've spoken with a lot of people who are involved, is it your perception that there is a strong peaceful component of people who really want change, and who are just frustrated with the system the way things are, and that on the other hand there are people who just want to destroy, just want to bring things down? That's sort of the perception I get from, again, nationwide, not just Minneapolis, but is that at all true?
Yeah, it's true. There's that split. I recognized it when I first got to the protest / riot scene, like day 3 of it all in May. You could sense the division within the crowd, and there was some racial components to that, but it was a lot of crossover too. In my example, there were the black individuals that they weren't as angry. They were talking to the police, who were like, so the scene was, there was National Guard troops blocking off a perimeter of where the riots had occurred. We don't want more in there. We're going to try to clean up what's in there. So we're going to block off these streets. And that's where people faced the National Guard troops and gathered. And I could sense a divide between those who were saying, like, we belong, and one woman was singing a song, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, we're not going to go down, like, we're still here, kind of thing. It was defiant, but it didn't seem like chaotic, or we're going to just break stuff. Whereas other people there were more just F the system, revolution, take it down, right? And that's where you get more of the, I guess, I don't know. It felt like an Antifa kind of feel. That you
and you
ended up
said there
seeing.
was a racial divide there.
It was more the predominantly black individuals being more like, we're still here, and then the whites that were more just furious. And my impression was that their fury didn't have much to do with George Floyd. Like
what do you think it had to do with?
Well, who knows how they grew up, but I think there's a lot of latent grief and anger in these individuals that's coming out, and they see an opportunity to let that out, and they're latching on to let it happen. Right. And people recognize it more now, and including individuals in the black community that actually right from the start, they were angry at the destruction by the whites, frankly.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of videos about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think in Minneapolis you have some of that. In fact, I think you have a lot of it. That's why a lot of the defund the police people are not black, and but certainly some are. And the individuals that are saying, no, we need the police in these black communities are obviously black leaders. But
the people, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I try to point those. I have some people I know that are white, and they're like, we need to defund the police. And I says, yeah, but these black leaders are saying they don't want that. but I don't know. There was an article written a long time ago called "Made Up Minds," and how it's so hard to change a mind that's made up, and that's so true. So what are you gonna do?
Right, right. So let's. I want to hear a little bit about your documentary. Tell me what's going on with that, and what that's all about.
Sure. Well, as you saw in that clip, I explain kind of what in that clip I illustrate and explain how we got to this point of where distributed media, along with a more it kind of pushed society more polarized.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas now in social media, people can just join groups, and it's not a coincidence that ever since the internet, we've had Black Lives Matter, Tea Party, Me Too, Occupy Wall Street. We've had all these things. We've had a lot of things happen to cause these, but there have been police shootings forever in the Black community. And now we get Black Lives Matter. And there have been people mad about taxes forever. And now we get the Tea Party in the last 20 years or so. We have fringe candidates rising to the top. Trump might be the most fringe, but Ron Paul, other ones too along the way. And so I lay out how, it's basically just our society's coming to grips with the internet, and it's been causing a lot of unrest. Ultimately, I want to compare that to what the printing press did to Europe, because I think there's parallels there. I don't go into that in this documentary, but I think I think that that's a valid comparison. But that's just one part of the documentary. Most of the documentary is where I do my thing and I interview people on the ground. So it starts last fall at Trump's rally in Minneapolis. And I interview rally attendees, I interview protesters throughout the day, and it's all, the people are eager to get inside. There's a celebratory feel in this long line all day to get in the rally. During the day, the protests are largely just standing there with a sign and talking, and it's a quiet, peaceful protest. But then as the day progressed, it got more and more loud and energetic, and this isn't surprising that there's more and more people. And then I got right in the middle of all that. In fact, so did some rally attendees who thought they were supposed to go into the front door of the Target Center, but they weren't, because that's where the protests were. And the rally attendees were to line up 3 blocks away and walk through the skyways. We have skyways in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And take those to Targets, which was a great idea. It kept them 4 blocks apart.
If people know about it.
These unlucky poor guys didn't know this. And so I followed these 20-somethings with one maintained his MAGA hat. I just think he did it just to be like, I can keep this on. But the others were just walking through, and somehow people knew they were going to the rally. Like they could just sort of feel it or detect it that, no, this guy's a Trump supporter, even though if he would have been holding a sign saying, you're the 99% or something, you wouldn't have known any different.
Yeah.
But they could just sense, I don't know, I guess because they was next to the guy with the MAGA hat, or because the way they were walking with their heads down or something. But there was a procession of these rally attendees. I think it was also because there was a parking lot that way, and they had to get to the lineup for the rally, through the protesters. I don't know. People were coming from out of town, from the suburbs, from the exurbs, from the country. So I followed these guys through that gauntlet, and it was a gauntlet. They got the business, something fierce. They didn't
physical violence, or
they didn't. One guy knocked his hat off. That was the most of it. There was very little physical abuse, but my gosh, the things they said, and excuse me. And I got that fury right there, I mean, it was great footage, to be honest, as a documentary.
Oh, I bet.
So
here's a question I have for you. I've noticed, just as a user of social media, that I would say in the last year especially, and especially with Facebook, that people have been, I think it's because of the algorithm, that people have been even more pushed into these little echo chambers. I feel more isolated than I ever have. Several years ago, I would be on Facebook, be on Twitter, and get into debates with friends. And we would have long conversations and, you know, a lot of disagreement, a lot. Now, and I would say for the last at least year or so, I'm pretty much only hearing back from people who agree with me. And
Well,
every once in a while, you know, some of it might just be, okay, people are sick of, you know, talking to me about stuff, fine. But it happened kind of all of a sudden. And I'm also only seeing a very small number of, so my sense and the sense of a lot of people is that this isn't just a polarization that's happened because of the nature of social media, but there's a deliberate manipulation going on. What do you think about that?
you know, chicken or egg. People have been saying that about media forever.
Mm.
They blame the media for dividing the country, but if it bleeds, it leads, because that's what people want. That's what people want to read. And I, I don't know. I guess because I've been hearing so much about how social media is doing this to people, how it's manipulating people. I'm 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 trying to push back a little bit on that and say, look, they're just maximizing their product. Like the way advertisers figure out that, you know what, if we offer a 30% coupon right when you're checking out, then you're probably
Mm-hmm.
going to get a second product. I mean, that's manipulation too, but they're
But it's
actual,
manipulating a tendency that already exists, is what you're
they're
saying.
just,
It's
you know what, it works out better if we label it with this color or that color, or we use this font or that font. I mean,
mm-hmm.
they're just responding to human behavior. And I guess you could call it manipulation, and, you know, but then you could call it pretty much anything to manipulate. I comb my hair so people watching this think, you know, I'm put together. I mean, uh, so they have a tool, humans are using it, and they're maximizing it to full capacity. Now, this is where, you know, a socialist would say that's the evil of capitalism. All they care about is profit. And yeah, it is a downside of it. It is that all they are is looking for. You're right. They are looking more for profit. I mean, they care a little bit about things when they block groups, and so there's some other, motives there besides money. But yeah, mostly it's money. They want to maximize their product, the way an advertiser does, or a TV show wants to put a hook at the end so you watch the next episode. Um, So the reason why the algorithm worked the way it did, I would guess, is because that's what people wanted, right? They
Mm-hmm.
they ended up pushing people into
People
these
use it more if
clusters.
they're not engaging with people who don't see the world
It
the way
feels
they
better
do.
to get likes than
Yeah.
dislikes,
Yeah.
right? I just think this is. I think they're the reaction. I think the algorithm is
Mm-hmm.
the reaction to human behavior. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean they're not culpable and they shouldn't. Maybe it's like a bartender continuing to give an alcoholic,
Right.
his 12th or 13th drink. Like, okay, I could keep making money here. He's a great tipper, but at some point you just have to, you know what, I have some power here to do the right thing. And yeah, I think social media will uh, start doing that perhaps, although there has to be an incentive. And right now there isn't a huge incentive because they have monopolies on these specific areas of social media. Um, so I tend to see it as a human behavior thing first, and social media reacting to it.
So what
But
do
but it
you
certainly is a powerful force that's causing more and more polarization. Yes.
Yeah, it's pushing things in that direction.
Mhm.
What do you recommend? What do you think the solution or a solution is for people who want to have communication between people who don't see things the same way? You know, people who look at this polarization and say, "Wow, that's not going to take us anywhere good." You know, how can we get people talking to each other in a civil way? How do we do that?
I think and this is the end of my movie.
Well, I don't want to give things away. I mean, no
Well,
spoilers.
let's just say I touch on this idea of, because I didn't want to leave it like, oh my gosh, we're in a crazy time. Because after the Trump rally, I then go over the past year, because of course that was just
Mm,
the start of the
right.
past year of craziness, COVID, the Floyd riots, and so forth. Homelessness here went through the rough year, or at least it rose a lot. So
Yeah.
this past, everyone knows 2020 has been crazy, and it continues to be. And we can engage with people we disagree with. It's not hard. You're just not going to find it online very often. And if you do, it's probably not where you're looking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was at the gym and the owner of my gym was offering some opinions I didn't agree with, but by no means was it a problem. Um, this happens in life fairly frequently. If you talk to, you probably follow some people I follow on Twitter, and they are who I would consider to be reasonable people who've kind of done what I think needs to be done more of these days, and that's sort of step out of the action reaction craziness. I was watching, I was in the gym like 2 nights ago, and MSNBC was really mad at the Republicans for wanting to put in a justice, which isn't a surprise. You know, all
Right.
that is um, expected, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, but the language they used on MSNBC, like they would kill 100,000 people to stay in power. They killed, you know, I don't know what they said exactly. I wrote down a few things because it was so extraordinary, but that's what we need to get out of that. And you know, you could say, oh, is the media causing it? Well, it's just part of the game, right? They
Mm-hmm.
are, but they're also reacting to what people watch. So, and what they want. It's that whole energy. It's that whole action, reaction energy going along for the ride. And instead of stopping and saying, whoa, 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 where are we right now? We need to get off this roller coaster. We've got two people running for president that there's really no win here. I think if you step off the roller coaster, you're going to say either one guy is just, well, whatever. I don't want to offend anyone, but I think you can either, I think you can clearly see the downsides of both people. And if you do think Trump is some warrior that's taking down the state, then or draining the swamp or something, then at the very least, you have to accept that he's a divider and he's not a uniter. And this is where, and the name of my documentary is Trump, Minneapolis, and the Divided State of America.
Mm.
We are so divided. We need someone to unify. And there is unity coming. It's just not happening on this pop culture, mass media surface. It's
Where do you
happening.
think it's coming from?
Well, there's people on Twitter that we follow. Eric Weinstein, I
Mm-hmm.
see be one of those people. The Unite 2020. I think that's getting to the right. I like that right now. I think
Okay.
I think they're on the right track. And of course, they have a lot of people who hate them, and they might say things I disagree with. But the point is that they've got the overall energy right, and they're right that we need to stop and look around and say, what are we even doing? Because
Yeah.
the stuff happening, it's from city on up to the federal level. Like we've got people in our city council here who are, whoa, how'd we get here? Like, what are they doing there? They don't know what they're doing. And people are sort of waking up to that. So instead of just getting mad at that city council person, instead of getting mad at the president, just kind of not check out, you know, watch it. Don't get too wrapped up in the media coverage of it. And then recognize what we need to do to solve things. And it's probably outside of the government if the government is so toxic right now. If the rhetoric is so toxic, then you know what I do is I work with some nonprofits in the inner city. I highlight the issues that they're having, and I do these Facebook live streams with them actually to talk about the violence and the people who've been affected by it. I guess we just had 8 more people shot recently, and in a city our size, that's a lot. That's a really bad day. So there's no slowing down of that violence and the unrest in those communities. It's spilling over. Actually, I just got assaulted.
I saw that. I saw that. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it was just some crazy guy who wanted to pick a fight, and he was out of his mind.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what it sounded like.
That's not anything new to you, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a
No,
person out of their mind on the street. It was really strange how it was right outside of these incredibly nice parks in this beautiful area of the city with $1 million homes. And then he approached my friend and me, and then he threw his jacket at my friend's head, and it knocked my friend's hat off. And my friend turned around to say, "What's up, dude?" And the guy was right there to confront my friend, as if my friend
Right.
did something to him, right? It
Right.
was reversed. And it was nonstop. The worst of it was the fear, because he had a knife, and I was
Yeah,
waiting for
that's
him to pull it
scary.
out, because he talked about some gun that we had and we didn't. And just looking at someone like that in their eyes and trying to, like, that's really a weird thing when you're connecting to someone who's very disconnected from
Right.
reality.
There's no reasoning with them. And
No, no, there
yeah.
isn't. And it keeps you on your toes. It reminds you that uh, we're a violent species, and that there are these problems in the city. There's a homeless camp actually 1 block north of there in one of the parks, because the city this year, instead of having them all congregate in one park, which was turning into a terrible, terrible place to be, they've now distributed the homeless in various parks around the city. And one of those
Mm,
parks was 1 block north of where the guy hit me. So
right.
I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, getting back to what you were talking about just a minute ago, it does seem to me that sort of one of the silver linings of all the just the craziness that we're living through right now, and I get that a lot of people are caught up in it and are getting into the back and forth and the demonizing of people who see
mhm,
things differently, or people who wear a mask or don't wear a mask, all these different things that you can pick a side and decide that somebody else is the enemy, and you can just put all your energy into that. Of course there's a lot of that, but I'm also seeing more of what you're talking about, which is the stepping back and saying, wait a second, maybe this fighting each other is not helping us. Maybe it's serving someone else's interests. Maybe it's just perpetuating,
mhm,
the larger problem. And my hope, as someone who is not a big fan of government solutions, my hope is that people will start to do more of what you're talking about, which is
mhm,
create your solutions. Don't pin all your hopes on some politician. As
mhm.
you said, we've got these two just mind-bogglingly awful in different ways people to choose from, but that's not true, because that's not our only choice. We also have the choice to create solutions ourselves, which is what you're doing. So my sort of one of the silver linings I see is that I do see more people looking beyond the system and looking to what they can do as individuals, and um,
Mhm.
just stepping back from a little bit. Obviously, there's still a lot of craziness going on. There's still a lot of that energy of demonizing the other side and thinking that they're the problem. But I do see a lot of people pulling back.
Yeah, and the government will continue to have an incredible amount of power. So the city of Minneapolis continues to run the city police, and they have the monopoly on security and force here. So there's not that you can't do your own neighborhood security. In fact, the police have even recommended that neighbors
Right.
do
Right. I
that,
saw.
which
Yeah.
is surprising. But there you go. It's like in some ways the government is even saying, we can't do this. We need you to step
Yeah,
up.
police all across the country have been saying that. They've been advising people to, get armed, get trained. We can't protect all of you. So
Mhm.
I'm over here saying, well, why am I paying your salary then? What's the point? Do you
We're
have
gonna
any? Go ahead.
we're yeah, well, we're gonna have to just swallow that pill. Like, having to continue to pay for things that aren't happening is gonna be I don't see a way that taxes are ever gonna come down. I think one day it will, but because the services are becoming so inefficient, and there'll be some sort of way to make them much more efficient in or out of government, so that taxes will, I think, go down, but not in my,
I
I don't
think
think
what
in
I don't know. I mean, I'm terrible at timing things. I really am.
everyone
I've
is.
yeah. It's so I always give that caveat, but well, taxes will go away when we make it impossible or too costly. It's like any kind of crime. It'll go away when you make it too costly to commit it. And we haven't figured out a way to do that yet. So
I think
Who
people will step
knows?
out of the system somewhat and maybe do more cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of hope for that. Hasn't solved the problem yet, but I
Well,
feel like,
it's new. It's
yeah,
new.
it is. It is.
Patience is so key here. What's the phrase, like we overestimate what's going to happen in a year and underestimate what happens in 10 years?
Yeah.
And I think we would find that to be true with Amazon, Tesla, the internet in general. And I think that'll be the way with cryptocurrency too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. We are still at the early days of it. It's, it doesn't seem like that to someone who's been born into this era and is growing up with it, but
yeah,
it's still
it's
very
already been
early.
10 years, but in 10 years, actually, there has been a ton of progress, but that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
going to continue to develop strongly. Um, Look, we as a society, we have the situation that we're in, and practically speaking, yes, we do have just two choices for who's going to be president, and one of those men will be president. Um, and we have our city councils and our mayors and our governors, but we make the best with what we have, and stop making it worse. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you stop and look around at how bad things are, it's a product of all the things we've done to get here. And even though we can't magically make it stop, we can stop digging ourselves deeper,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Well, and
work
we can
to,
stop putting our energy into the things that only make it worse. There's,
this look back on the last 4 years. We could have reversed course pretty easily. All that would have had to have been done is for the Democrats to have, I think, put up a real strong unifying candidate, and then denounce the chaos, right? The only reason why Trump is doing so well is because he continues to have people who want him to protect the country from the craziness, right? He wouldn't be
that's the biggest
attractive
reason for sure. Yeah.
if you had a candidate like Trump in the fact that maybe patriotic, or at least wanted the country to be strong and protecting the country, and a zero tolerance on rioting, this sort of thing, and a positive candidate, not one that's just attacking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Trump wouldn't be able to stand up to that person, because all Trump has is really largely all he has is his attacks, and people cling to him when they're afraid of the chaos happening. If somehow the Democrats would have focused on solutions and denounced wrong when it's clearly wrong, then I don't know how Trump would have stood up to that person. And I think he would have been resoundingly defeated. But because it's like every time Trump says something so offensive, or does something that's just, this can't be our president, then suddenly there's a new riot, or there's a new
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
low, like taking over portions of a city in Seattle, right? Like burning down and angering the people of color in your city to maybe want to vote for Trump, because all of their businesses have been destroyed, and the
Right.
police weren't there, and the police were called down, was told to
Right.
step down, and the
Right.
mayor defended the looting. Like, they're doing
It's
everything
almost like they're working for the Trump
they can
campaign.
to keep Trump there. Yeah, like Trump's a product of all this back and forth craziness. So we got to just step
Yeah.
back from.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I don't think that stepping back is going to happen within the context of presidential campaigns. I feel like, I mean, for myself, I
that's
don't
true.
put any energy there. And I just wonder to what extent, people who don't think the way I do are starting to see that maybe that's not where solutions lie. Maybe because you're right, you look at both parties, and I feel like presidential elections are generally like this, maybe with the exception of when Ron Paul was running, but where it's really more attack driven. It's more,
Yeah.
slinging mud at the other person,
Yeah.
and you know a campaign based on what's wrong with the other side, which is easy to do because there's so much wrong with both of them. But
Mm-hmm.
I think people right now are hungry for solutions. And my hope is that they don't keep turning to, political candidates and presidential candidates, especially, to provide those solutions, because, this is kind of where that's gotten us. And What are your thoughts?
Well, they are an increasing number, which is kind of what's interesting. I think it's going to continue to, like, people, because it was a point of attack, people got mad at Trump for the COVID response, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't stop and ask, well, I mean, was this even a federal?
Yeah.
People think that that's a stupid question. They'll say, of course it's a federal issue. And of course, and I agree
It
with
was
them
the
that it is.
governors who
But
enforced
like,
it.
but like, they were mad at him for not having a handle on this thing countrywide, you know, and they didn't appreciate, one, the federal government was never really set up to do this kind of thing in the US. It's a decentralized 50 states. But because it was a point of attack on Trump, then they encouraged that idea that this should be taken care of from the top down. And now that's pretty much Biden's main talking point was,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to, COVID, like the flyer I got in the mail of Biden and, is it Kamala?
I don't know. I don't watch that. I read I don't
Biden,
watch news. I read it.
Biden Harris, you know, they're like holding up their two hands together like this, you know, he's got her hands together, and they both got these black masks on. They look like Mortal Kombat characters. They look like Scorpion and Reptile. In fact, I thought of like doing a Photoshop thing or putting it on Reddit, Photoshop battles, and being like, hey, do this. Like they're waiting to be called out as, and of course they might like that. They might want to be.
It's more attention.
Combat characters because it's funny and we're warriors or something. Yeah, we're gonna fight COVID. I don't know. But yeah, it's growing in the idea that that people think that, oh, the government needs to do more and more and more for us. That's also, it's complicated. There's a lot of reasons why you think they should do more and a lot of reasons why you think they should do less. Another reason why people think they should do more is because they look at the world and they say, well, look how Japan and Korea and Singapore and China reacted to this. I mean, they had it on lockdown and now Singapore is normal. Why couldn't America do that? Yeah, why couldn't we do that from the top down?
Yeah, but and then they always ignore Sweden in that when they bring those up.
Sweden, yes, of course they do. But they look at
here's the thing. All the evidence right now, and there are people, there are published articles now in medical journals, and like a dozen analyses that have come out now showing there's no correlation between lockdown and better outcomes or masks and better outcomes. And all these centralized efforts have, obviously made things worse in economic terms and in other terms, but even leaving that aside, they didn't even do what they purported to do. And so
I think people saw cases like Singapore and they said, why not here?
Or mainland China. I heard that a lot. They did this in mainland China. And
you know what? That's their system. They're very top down. They're very obedient and compliant. And Americans are just the opposite. I mean, we've had record gun sales this year again. How many times are we gonna have record gun sales in a row? Like, it's
as long as they keep this up. I mean, thank God we can defend ourselves.
That's the pushback against the idea that people want more and more government, is that the reality is they are doing more and more at the top. Like, we have FEMA doing a lot more for natural disasters than we used to have, that than even 20, 30 years ago. But at the same time, security is happening more at a neighborhood level. And just, I don't know, I think more and more is just going to be occurring locally, outside of that established infrastructure. I mean, the internet helps us with that, actually.
Yeah, so it does.
After the riots here, it went viral to go hand out, we need donations. And so you'll see this story on the news here, just soon after the riots they must have gathered 1,000 bags of groceries from people who just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. Wow. And they had to turn away people who wanted to donate food, right? So you don't need a city management agency for that, right? That's kind of organic in the power of the internet. So the internet, cryptocurrency, there's going to be things that empower decentralization, individuals, doing voluntary efforts. I'm trying to practice what I preach. I mean, that's the way I proceed. And government is going to continue to have a hand, and I hope it's a healthy hand. I'll see it as a continuing dwindling hand because of just the state of technology and it outpacing what government needs to do or even can do. But while it still has a purpose, and right now it has an incredibly strong, important purpose, you want there to be capable and competent people. So I think we'll also get a round of better city council people, mayors, governors, in cities that were most affected. So better government.
That'll be interesting to see.
More on the ground, because I think we've learned that lesson too, that if we're not going to be able to rely on others to help, we're going to have to help ourselves.
Yeah. And you see that happening in Minneapolis, that like more neighborhood defense, more local.
Yeah, there's been more of that. I had a dear friend of mine, the most soft-spoken, nice guy in the world, and he emailed me privately to say, hey, I'm getting the gun.
I've heard that from a lot of people too. Yeah.
So yeah, I think more people are recognizing that. Neighborhood watch. Oh, and I mean, right now there's a lot of homeschooling.
Yeah, absolutely.
My friend in Culver City there, I was on the phone with him yesterday, the day before. And I mean, they have to be home, but they're doing a deal where he takes his daughter and they have him working with like 5 other families. So there's like 5. And it's just basically kind of like a homeschooling co-op, only the curriculum and stuff is,
coming from the school. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working with a local organization to set up something like that, where it's like an outdoor setting. We're in California, we can do that. It's kind of an outdoor setting with indoor options, but where kids can come and they can do their Zoom calls with their classes, but they can have other kids to be around and they can have outdoor activities, and they're not just stuck at home. On my parent groups, I'm just seeing these like cries of despair of, what am I going to do? I've got my kids here, doing school on a computer, and it's just driving everybody nuts. And the poor kids aren't getting any outside time. It's just, so there are ways to help mitigate that and help, create a more normal experience for kids given this completely bizarre situation we're in. And yeah, I see a lot of individual efforts in that direction.
And you just gave me an idea. If you really want to be of service to people, perhaps outside your community, I don't know who your listening audience is, but go into the inner city and help families there, because those are the kids who are either left home alone.
Yeah.
And they're not getting, I posted something on Facebook I thought was just like, well, that's obvious, but kind of overlooked. I said, if you think the racial achievement gap in Minnesota, which is already always talked about because it's high, if you think it's high now, think about all those Minneapolis students that aren't getting any education right now,
right,
compared to suburban kids and rural kids that more so are. Because these inner cities are nuts. I mean, I just said earlier in this talk, 8 more shot. If 8 of 8 weren't in the inner city, 7 of 8 of them were. And as one principal at that school recently described, at a school in the North Minneapolis area recently said, there's people driving 60 miles an hour down the city streets. It's out of control. And how are kids supposed, it's not just hard for kids to learn in that, but they get caught up in that.
Yeah.
And if there's no parent home, I mean, they're going to just.
Right. Well, and that's another thing, that there's also this divide that I'm not sure how many people are thinking about this, but there are certain kinds of jobs where it's not a big deal to just work from home. There's, if you're an attorney, if you're a journalist, if you're, a lot of jobs, you can just do it on the computer. You can't do that if you're waiting tables. You can't do that if you're, if you're doing physical labor. And so that is just into the divide, the economic divide between those two income levels, or those two types of work. It's tremendous. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really,
I mean, it will likely exacerbate the economic split in this country. Like that's probably going to continue to worsen. Um, yeah, like I think in many ways things are going to continue to get more unraveled before they come back together. I
hmm
think that's the internet's legacy as the printing press. Just it decentralized, it disrupted, it broke apart the
hmm
power of the Catholic Church, and there was a lot of blood. Like there was a lot of fighting over that. There were cults that broke out. There's this incredible story about these. Back then, they were the Anabaptists, and we still have Anabaptists now. They're who we call the Amish and the Mennonites.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
but then they broke away, and even Luther, I think, was a little bit leery of them. The guy who started it
Yeah.
all. Um, but they overtook the city of Munster, Germany, and they had this like walled off. It was already walled city, I believe, and they would fight
Yes.
men. They would then they isolated themselves and they became a cult. And the leaders of it said, "Oh, by the way, we get 3 wives. Oh, by the way, we get And they started to do what cults do.
Right.
Eventually, the king's men did break down and get into the city, and those guys were tortured and hung. And in that city of Munster, you can still
Yeah.
see the cases where
I
they were.
I do remember reading about that. Yeah.
The point is the printing press and the Reformation. The printing press helped the Reformation. It helped everything become reformed in European power structures, and the internet is kind of helping that happen here.
Yeah.
And I
But
don't know,
it's not a simple. It's not a clean process. It's a messy.
the have and the have-nots will worsen, I think, and we'll probably see more homelessness. People are going to have to realize um, what they're going to have to do to get by. I think that might drive more people to cryptocurrency because that's
hmm
going to continue to be a better and better option as fiat money is more and more regulated. So I think it's all just, I think decentralization is slowly happening. I think it's inevitable here, um, especially in America. Maybe not so much in China, but
Yeah.
America
Yeah.
for sure.
Although they already have their decentralized underground stuff anyway,
Very
as
underground
far
then.
as far as it goes, or they did what they
Yeah,
did when I was there. I don't know how things are now. I'm
yeah.
gonna need
Ours
to
is
let so I'm gonna need to let you go in just a couple of minutes. I just want to ask you one more question. Getting back to the inner city and economic divide stuff, because you've
yeah,
done a lot of work with the homeless. I know you've done a lot of you've at least done a lot of videos in the inner city. Sorry, my cat's walking in front of the camera here.
no sorries. That's gonna help our views way up.
It is. Cats are always a win.
Cat
Um,
video.
what would you recommend to people who are living outside of the inner city, but would like to do something to help the people who are in this crappy situation right now that's just gotten worse? What are some of the things that you would recommend people do?
Well, if you're organizing some kind of co-op for parents learning from home, of kids learning from home, introduce it to nonprofit leaders, people who can speak for, who can connect to the inner city. Most of us don't have a connection to the inner city.
Mm-hmm.
So work with those who do. And so my media is the Periphery. That's my YouTube channel, Facebook page, all that. I'm starting the Periphery Foundation. I've incorporated it this year, and I've got a board, and it's slowly coming up. And that'll be one of its main avenues of effort, is not necessarily doing the work in these areas themselves, whether it's an inner city or a reservation or a trailer park somewhere, but working with organizations that do, because people like ask the question that you just asked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but until our organization gets more established, I would say just work your network, do a Google search, whatever, find, or a Brave browser search. It's
Yeah.
actually what I mean nowadays. And because that's the thing, if you use the Brave browser, you earn oh, what's the name of it? Basic BAT. You earn their cryptocurrency. And it's not a lot, obviously, but there's going to be more of those ways to just be compensated, monetize our activity. And so suddenly that server, and I think more people are doing this, and I know they are, they're supplementing their maybe they're waiting tables, but they used to mine cryptocurrency when that was
Right.
really, but
Yeah.
now they're, I don't know, there's various ways you can earn. Well, there's a thousand ways to work from home, but just by using the Brave browser, you earn basic attention tokens, which alludes to your attention, advertising, that kind of thing, and then they'll compensate you, as part of that deal. But go on your Brave browser, do an internet search for nonprofits in your area, and they're going to be more than happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to offer you this this curriculum or this place or this idea for helping kids in the inner city with education. I mean, I almost guarantee that would be an immediate hit. The cat thinks so.
Yeah.
So
The cat's all over it. The cat's all over it.
We're not in all these worlds that are nonetheless so close to where we live, but they are still just an internet search away.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we're more connected to them than ever, and they are quite accessible, even if we don't have a direct relationship with anyone in them.
Right.
So yeah, and if people are interested in learning about my work, they can, shoot me an email or whatever, Brandon@theperiphery.com.
Okay, so I'm gonna put your email up in the links, and any links you give me, I'll give them the Periphery, your YouTube channel. And
Sure.
Can they find your documentary on the Periphery, or is there a separate link for that?
Yeah, that'll be on the Peripheries. The YouTube channel is called The Periphery, so if you just look that up on YouTube, you'll find it there. And it premieres Tuesday. It premieres next Tuesday, the 29th at 8 p.m. Central, so I think 6 o'clock your time.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you back on again, and I'm sure hopefully have more exciting things to talk about. More exciting in a positive way, hopefully, not
Progress.
just more craziness. Yes.
Yeah, there'll certainly be topics to discuss and hopefully progress to report.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.